Today on RoxomTV News, the U.S. raid in Venezuela is now under international scrutiny as the United Nations questions its legality and the country settles into an uneasy calm under new leadership. In Europe, leaders are closing ranks around Greenland, pushing back as President Trump again raises the prospect of U.S. control and testing the limits of NATO unity. And in markets, copper hits record highs as U.S. stockpiling tightens global supply and reshapes expectations for trade, inflation, and growth. All that and more right now on today's show. Let's get into it, starting with the world news. Now, this morning, the legality of the U.S. raid in Venezuela is under international scrutiny. The UN Human Rights Office says it was clear the raid undermined international law. Since Saturday, Venezuela has been living under what reporters on the ground are describing as a tense and uneasy calm. Some shops have reopened and daily routines are slowly resuming, but streets remain quieter than usual and residents describe a lingering sense of fear, uncertainty, and a focus on buying only basic necessities following a wave of panic buying over the weekend. Many Venezuelans say they are deeply anxious about what comes next, but at the same time, they cannot afford to stop working, even as political powers shift above them. Now, that shift now has become official as the political center of gravity in Venezuela has moved to Delcy Rodríguez. Now, Rodríguez was formally sworn in as interim president at the National Assembly, stepping into the role as the most senior surviving figure of Nicolás Maduro's longstanding regime. As Maduro's former vice president and oil minister, Rodríguez represents continuity rather than rupture, particularly for the security services, the state oil sector, and the political establishment that has governed the country for years. Venezuela's legislature remains overwhelmingly pro-government. Most opposition parties, including the faction led by Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado, boycotted last year's parliamentary elections, arguing they would not be free or fair. Now, that decision left the opposition without meaningful institutional power at the very moment the country entered its most consequential political transition in decades. Now, behind the scenes, U.S. intelligence assessments suggest this outcome was not unexpected. According to a Wall Street Journal report, the CIA concluded that the regime loyalists were best positioned to retain control after Maduro's removal, making continuity more likely than an immediate transfer of power to the opposition. Now, the assessment reportedly identified Rodríguez and two other senior figures as the most viable interim leaders, capable of maintaining order and preventing a sudden collapse of the state. Now, that intelligence backdrop helps explain Washington's strategy here. Rather than attempting to rapidly install a new political leadership in Caracas, U.S. officials have focused on leverage, pressure, and limiting instability, while allowing internal power structures to reassert themselves. Meanwhile, Nicolás Maduro's fight is shifting to the courtroom. After pleading not guilty on Monday, Maduro's defense team has argued that he was unlawfully seized, describing the operation as a kidnapping rather than a legitimate arrest. Maduro is now being represented by Barry Pollock. Pollock is a prominent U.S. defense attorney, best known for negotiating Julian Assange's 2024 plea deal, and he has signaled an aggressive legal strategy that will challenge U.S. jurisdiction and the legality of Maduro's capture. Now, that legal battle is expected to be prolonged and highly public, unfolding alongside political developments inside of Venezuela. Now, Maduro is currently being held in a Brooklyn detention facility that federal prosecutors themselves have described as dangerous. Now, before we continue, here is a video talking about the facility where Maduro is currently being held. Let's take a look.
So the Metropolitan Detention Center, even though it is relatively new, is a horrible, decrepit, and dangerous facility. It's frequently without heat. It is frequently having leaking plumbing, vermin, bugs, and rats. It is just physically incredibly poor shape for a new building.
Now, back inside Venezuela, the transition has been accompanied by a sharp escalation in repression. You see, the Financial Times reports that authorities declared a state of emergency, deployed armed pro-government militias known as colectivos across Caracas, and detained journalists, including reporters working for foreign outlets. Media unions say at least 14 journalists were detained around the National Assembly during Rodriguez's swearing-in ceremony. Now, while most were later released, the detentions reinforced fears that the regime is tightening control even as leadership changes hands. U.S. officials have attempted to calm concerns about broader conflict. Republican lawmakers have emphasized that the operation does not signal a long-term military engagement, saying the goal is leverage rather than occupation, and that any further action would depend on cooperation from Caracas. Now, before we move on, here is what Republican lawmakers said following the operation. Let's take a look.
We are not at war. We do not have U.S. armed forces in Venezuela, and we are not occupying that country. The Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war, that is true. But it also vests the President of the United States with vast authorities as Commander-in-Chief. Under Article 2 of the Constitution, the President has the authority, as all presidents do, to deploy military forces to address threats to the U.S. and to enforce U.S. law.
For Venezuelans on the ground, however, daily life is defined less by diplomatic statements and more by uncertainty, fear, and the way the new leadership chooses to wield power in the days ahead. You see, one of Washington's immediate priorities here is testing whether Venezuela's oil sector can realistically be brought back into global markets. Early signals suggest long timelines, high cost, and significant political risk rather than an immediate boost to global supply. The Trump administration is preparing meetings with major U.S. oil companies this week, underscoring how central energy policy has become to the post-Maduro strategy. Some activity has resumed. Chevron has begun calling employees back to Venezuela, and limited oil exports are restarting under U.S. authorization. Now, executives and analysts do caution, however, that Venezuela's oil infrastructure has been severely degraded after years of sanctions, underinvestment, and mismanagement. Any meaningful increase in production would likely take years rather than months. President Trump has floated the idea of U.S. subsidies to help rebuild Venezuela's energy infrastructure, suggesting the process could take less than 18 months. Now, that proposal would represent an unusual shift, transferring some financial and political risk from private companies to the United States taxpayers. International energy firms are already facing challenges. Financial Times reporting shows that Eni and Repsol are struggling to recover roughly $6 billion in unpaid gas contracts, highlighting unresolved debts and sanctions complications. Reuters has described the opportunity facing oil majors as potential poisoned chalice. Venezuela holds the world's largest proven oil reserves, but much of that oil is heavy crude that is expensive to extract and sits at the higher end of global break-even costs. For oil markets, the impact remains structural rather than immediate. Venezuela currently produces less than 1% of global supply, meaning prices are unlikely to move sharply on headlines alone. Now, away from geopolitics, the operation has also raised questions in financial markets. An unknown trader made more than $400,000 after betting on prediction market Polymarket that Nicolás Maduro would be removed from power. Reuters reports the trader built roughly $34,000 in positions in the days leading up to the operation. After news of Maduro's capture broke, those contracts surged in value, generating an estimated $410,000 in profit. The account was created only last month, and the trader's identity still remains unknown. Bloomberg reports that the largest bets were placed shortly before President Trump publicly announced the operation, with prices moving even before the news became official. Now, that timing has sharpened questions about whether the trader benefited from exceptional foresight or access to non-public information. The episode has renewed scrutiny of prediction markets. Democratic Congressman Richie Torres has said he plans to introduce legislation barring lawmakers and federal employees from trading on such platforms. Now, Polymarket has not commented on the trades as of yet, and while Americans remain formally blocked from the platform, many traders continue to use VPNs to access it. Meanwhile, the New York Times is reporting on why Marina Corina Machado wasn't chosen as successor after the capture of Maduro, because Machado's relationship with Trump officials had been fraying for months. Now, Marina Corina Machado was widely expected to emerge as the most visible opposition figure following Maduro's removal, but her influence so far remains largely symbolic. You see, Machado gained international attention in December when she traveled to Oslo to accept the Nobel Peace Prize for her long-standing opposition to authoritarian rule in Venezuela. She dedicated the award to President Trump. Now, before we show that moment, here's Machado speaking about the ceremony. Let's take a listen.
Let me be very clear. As soon as I learned that we had been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, I dedicated to President Trump because I believed at that point that he deserved it. And a lot of people, most people said it was impossible to achieve what he has just done on Saturday, January 3rd.
Now, since Maduro's capture, Machado has vowed to return to Venezuela and has called for new elections, arguing the opposition is prepared to win if a vote is held. She welcomed Washington's actions and sharply criticized interim President Delcy Rodríguez. Here is Machado responding directly to Rodríguez. Let's take a look.
And certainly we believe that this transition should move forward. Delcy Rodríguez, as you know, is one of the main architects of torture, persecution, corruption, narco trafficking. She's the main ally and liaison with Russia, China, Iran. Certainly not an individual that could be, trusted by international investors.
Now, those comments come amid a tightening security environment. You see, more than a dozen journalists were detained this week while covering political events in Caracas, raising concerns about media freedom at the moment when the opposition is seeking momentum. Now, Machado has acknowledged that she has not spoken to President Trump since back in October. And according to the New York Times, U.S. officials deliberately chose not to back her as Venezuela's next leader, concluding that the opposition lacked the capacity to govern and that the overt support could destabilize the country. President Trump publicly expressed that view. Let's take a peek.
Well, I think it would be very tough for her to be the leader. She doesn't have the support within or the respect within the country. She's a very nice woman, but she doesn't have the respect to be the leader.
Is it possible?
Ultimately, that leaves Machado with strong international visibility and popular support among the opposition, but limited leverage inside Venezuela's power structure. Now, the public reaction in the United States over this remains divided. A Reuters Ipsos poll finds that about 1/3 of Americans approve of the operation that led to Maduro's capture, while nearly 3/4 worry the U.S. could become too deeply involved in Venezuela. Support is sharply partisan. Roughly 2/3 of Republicans back the operation, compared with much smaller shares of Democrats and independents. Even among Republicans, however, concerns persist about costs, escalation, and risk to the United States troops. Now, China has also emerged as one of the most vocal critics of the operation. Beijing framed the capture as a violation of international law and a dangerous precedent. Venezuela has been one of China's closest partners in Latin America for decades now, receiving billions in loans and investment, and analysts say China lacks the ability or appetite to materially intervene. Now, the episode highlights the limits of Beijing's influence when confronted with direct U.S. action. And I want to kind of go over my take here for a second, because when you step back and look at everything that's unfolded over the past couple of days, the picture that emerges here is a lot less cinematic than some of the early headlines might have suggested, and a lot more calculated than it might look at first glance. You see, this was never really about flipping a switch from dictatorship to democracy overnight, no matter how tempting that storyline may be. What Washington appears to have been aiming for was leverage, not liberation, and a reset of pressure rather than a full political takeover. You see, removing Maduro didn't open the door to the opposition marching in and just taking over. It shifted the balance inside the same system, leaving someone like Delcy Rodríguez in place because she represents continuity that military, the oil sector, and foreign creditors can all nod at and say, fine, we know how this works. Now, Maria Corina Machado, meanwhile, has legitimacy international recognition, and moral authority, which are all valuable things to have, but they don't come with the keys to the security forces, the oil ministry, or the treasury. Right now, that matters more than applause in Oslo. Now, on the economic side, the oil story is doing a lot of quiet truth-telling. Yes, the reserves are massive, but no, that does not mean oil is about to come flooding into the market like someone found a working light switch labeled Venezuela. Rebuilding that sector is slow, it's expensive, and politically messy. And oil executives are well aware that largest reserves in the world and easy investment are very different sentences. Now, China's reaction has been loud and indignant, which is sort of what China does in moments like this. But it's also revealed the limits of Beijing's influence when events move faster than press releases and UN talking points. And back in the United States, public opinion looks exactly like you'd expect. There's support for decisive action paired with a strong desire not to inherit another open-ended foreign problem that comes with a very large bill and no clear exit. For Venezuelans on the ground, though, none of this is theoretical, right? What matters is whether this transition brings stability, whether daily life improves, and whether this is actually a step forward or simply the same system with a new nameplate on the door. That's the real test here, and it's one that won't be answered by speeches, statements, or victory laps. It'll be answered by what Venezuela looks like months from now once the cameras leave and the hard part officially begins. All right, joining us to talk about this show and others, we have one of our good friends of the program, host of the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. Please give a welcome back to Cedric Jungelman. Cedric, Happy New Year. How are you? Thank you for joining us. How you been?
Oh, I'm great. Thank you for having me back, Hank. This is awesome to start the new year with you guys. I hope you've been well.
Oh, I've been great. I hope the same for you. And this is a great way to start the new year. We got a lot of fun news on the horizon, so let's talk about this first story, Cedric. The United Nations came out and said the U.S. operation against Maduro broke a basic rule of international law. For people watching at home, Cedric, what exactly is the UN saying crossed the line here? What do you think?
Sure, this is a unilateral action taken by the United States from sort of the global perspective. They're not acting in harmony with other states and nations. So, yeah, I could see why the UN would voice that concern. I'm not sure I'm a fan of the United Nations and their approach to sort of world affairs. And what is, legal and what is sort of lawful are different things. So what is really sort of international law when there are atrocities on the ground there politically, in terms of voting, elections, inflation, the law itself, corruption, and if no international bodies are going to come in, voting, we saw it seemed like there was a lot of fraud in Venezuela in the last election. So if the United States wouldn't act in this sort of situation, when would it call for another nation to do so? This was, from that perspective, I don't think international law really applies here in that framework of justice.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation, right? Because it does feel like it could be a bit of a slippery slope. If you're willing to do this in Venezuela, I've heard Trump talk about Cuba. Greenland is apparently also on the menu. But this could kind of spill over potentially to some overseas issues. I'm thinking China and Taiwan come to mind. Does that worry you at all generally that we're starting something here that we can't just repeal back? Like this domino has already fallen and we might see some other dominoes fall in ways down the line that maybe we wish wouldn't? Like, what are your thoughts on this, like, initially?
Sure, for sure. My initial reaction was horror that we took this unilateral action. And so obviously I've been doing my research and everyone's now an expert on Venezuela after 3 hours on X. So I've been looking into it just like everybody else and trying to understand why such a drastic action was taken. I'm trying to understand the difference between the stories that are pure propaganda and what the facts are. Some things just don't seem to ring true when you look at it in terms of this is, however you cut it, even if this is a business transaction between the Maduro clan and the United States in some faction or some way, this is a massive projection of power by the United States. No other government on earth could send an army of some sort of military, stage it off land on sea and do this sort of attack or capture another leader. So the fact that it was so smooth, though, and then some of the pictures of Maduro and some of the things he's saying, and the fact that he didn't have his team or defenders kill him before capture, especially since the United States has been sort of telegraphing this for a while, that they were going to take some sort of action. And the social media trolling online has been astonishing on both sides, even by Trump. So that is worrisome in that regard. And to your point, the United States taking unilateral action. I'm not sure I agree with this. I'm still working on going through all the issues, but another party or another administration or this administration could do something that could be really bad and could have second and third order effects. So this is, but and put your point on China, I think President Trump spoke to President Xi at 6:30 p.m. before the launch of the capture attack.
I was not aware of that.
I believe that to be true. And maybe this is some sort of exchange with Russia about Ukraine. We won't be in your backyard if you won't be in ours.
Right.
There's a lot of implications here with trade, with Iran, oil prices, the petrodollar currency, crypto and stable coins. So much is unfolding. I just got back from family vacation and I was astonished to see such dramatic big news upon turning on my phone. So the geopolitical matrix of the world just got a lot more complicated. There's a lot to unpack here, including the fact that, the United States decided to work with Delcy Rodríguez, who is a longtime regime insider, instead of backing the opposition, right? So my question for you, Cedric, is do you think that choice was mostly about just kind of preventing chaos in the meantime and keeping the country functioning, even if it maybe disappoints people that were hoping for some kind of real change? Because it is a potentially questionable move, I think. I think a lot of people are wondering what that was about. Yeah, I think if you are trying to say the Maduro regime is bad for democracy and corrupt and all about drug trafficking, which these are alleged facts or statements or assumptions, then you would definitely want to distance yourself from that faction of his support and his regime. But how much of this was agreed to beforehand? How much are they trying to manage the transfer of power? How much are they trying to avoid boots on the ground for some sort of, I think from Venezuela's perspective, I shouldn't say from Venezuela, from what we're trying to figure out, is this another Iraq and or Libya? Or is this something very different? And right. And does this prevent the takeover of Taiwan by China? Does this sort of stall that, or does this sort of bring this on faster?
Right. There's a lot to unpack here. It's kind of given me a little shades of Vietnam, potentially, depending on how things were to go, but we'll see how this ultimately plays out. And you're right, it is super interesting, like you said, kind of with Ukraine, Russia, kind of, hey, we're not messing with you guys right now, leave us alone to do this. And does it set a precedent for China, or does it maybe make them pause a little bit and be like, the United States is willing to kind of do some pretty drastic things right now, at least on an international stage. So I'd be curious as to where Xi Jinping lands on that right now. And not to mention, this has all the world kind of wondering now, what will the United States potentially do next? I'm not sure how I feel about that per se, but specifically I want to turn on our next story here, which is very much related here. I want to turn now to international politics of this, as a long running issue is resurfacing with renewed urgency as a result of what we're seeing here in Venezuela, as President Donald Trump has once again escalated his interest in taking control of Greenland, the world's largest island in a self-governing territory with the Kingdom of Denmark. Now, this is not exactly a new idea. Trump first raised the possibility in 2019, framing it as a large-scale real estate deal. Course. Now, during his second term, the rhetoric has shifted toward national security and the pressure has increased. Officials in Copenhagen and Greenland's capital, Nuuk, have repeatedly stated that the island is not for sale. The renewed concern comes after the recent U.S. actions abroad, including the seizure of Venezuela's president, which has heightened anxiety among European allies about Trump's willingness to intervene directly in other nations' affairs. Denmark has now taken the issue far more seriously, summoning the United States ambassador multiple times, and for the first time identifying the U.S. as a potential security concern in an intelligence assessment. Now, Trump has argued that Denmark does not adequately defend Greenland and that U.S. control is necessary to protect American interests. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen responded bluntly, stating that the United States has no right to annex any part of the Danish kingdom and emphasizing that Greenland is covered by NATO's collective defense guarantee. So the question remains, why Greenland? Well, the island sits at a strategic crossroads between North America, Europe, and the Arctic. It hosts the U.S. military's northernmost air base and radar systems used for missile detection and space monitoring. Now, as Arctic ice melts, Greenland is also becoming more central to future shipping routes and access to critical minerals, drawing interest from China and Russia as well. Greenlanders themselves overwhelmingly oppose becoming part of the United States. Political leaders across the island have called Trump's approach unacceptable, even while remaining open to closer economic cooperation with Washington. Now, why this should matter to viewers at home is that this story tests the boundaries of alliances. Any move against Greenland would strain NATO, pit allies against one another, and reshape how power is exercised in an increasingly competitive Arctic region. All right, we're bringing Cedric back. Cedric, this one's wild. President Trump first floated the idea of acquiring Greenland back in 2019. It's been the apple of his eye for some time. And at the time, many European leaders brushed it off as unrealistic, just Trump being Trump. This time, however, Denmark is summoning the U.S. ambassador and European governments are issuing joint statements on the matter. What do you feel changed that made this go from eye-rolling to serious concern? Is it all just because of Venezuela and nobody knows what to think now? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's definitely the timing in conjunction with Venezuela after the comments made about Colombia and the allusions I think made to Cuba as well. So I think what didn't come up in our last conversation was rare earths as well as missile defense with the Greenland conversation now. So this seems to align with Pax Americana or sort of United States hegemony. We're looking to just defend this hemisphere. It looks like we're breaking off into a multipolar world, which would mean bringing sort of manufacturing back or supply chains to our side of the globe in regions we can control and manage much more explicitly, and that are going to be politically aligned through force, it looks like, for the most part, not just through democracy and statesmanship.
Mm-hmm. And this is particularly interesting, I mean, because Trump has argued that the Greenland issue is about national security because he claims Denmark isn't doing enough to defend Greenland. I didn't know people were attacking it. But for someone trying to understand this at home, Cedric, what does Greenland actually offer strategically that makes it such a focus for the United States? You mentioned minerals, there are trading routes. Is there anything else we should be aware of that makes Greenland so important?
Yeah, its placement in the Arctic oceanways and the shipping routes are huge and key to defense and to future mineral extraction. I think Greenland only has 57,000 people. So, yeah, I think it's a very small population. It's the largest island in the Arctic. So it's a key place to be, to have control over. Just like another island that we're going to talk about in Saudi, between Saudi Arabia and Yemen. That's actually, I think, closer to Somalia than either, or at least to Yemen. But so its placement is key. And I think America, I don't think it's the Trump regime, but I think America has had its eyes on Greenland for a long time. And I think this is part of breaking up NATO, which I think is a Trump goal. And explicitly showing that NATO can't. I mean, this is going after another Western alliance member, Greenland and Denmark's territory. So this is abrupt. This is a further sort of distancing ourselves from, I think, the European alliance and from NATO, and demonstrating that we've been carrying the brunt of military cost, and we have the power. So. We'll see whether this is good, But.
Yeah, I mean, it does remain to be seen. It looks like Trump is kind of gearing up for what appears to be a a three-power kind of, I don't like to call it Cold War, but like a silent, jousting for power, right, between the United States, China, and Russia. So it kind of feels like, and let me know your thoughts, is this whole thing really just about Greenland, or is it more about just positioning ourselves for this future Arctic power struggle between Russia and China? They've had interest in Greenland before. It's a lot closer to us than it is to them. Is this all just about the United States positioning itself in the most powerful and secure way for the future? Is that this whole thing is really about here, you think?
Yeah, these are long-term, huge and key moves. We can't emphasize this enough, but around energy, rare earths, minerals. I mean, China dominates these right now. We have to catch up in terms of infrastructure, but also our ability to continue with our sovereignty. We've kind of shown that no nation, we're the only nation in a lot of ways that has full sovereignty. If we can remove world leaders at will without asking for permission, even from our allies, that is a tremendous amount of power. And that can only be, that is achieved through logistics, being able to position armies or military might by air or by sea, which is incredibly difficult, being able to sustain those personnel and assets with oil and food, as well as currency. So, so I think that this is about currency and energy and AI.
Yeah, it all comes back to AI, as you and I both know. But it's, it feels like right now the United States is, we're entering a new phase, I feel like, of a kind of global politics that we've been used to for a long time, right? Because right now we have European leaders are warning that this pressure on Greenland could in fact strain NATO itself. You mentioned that might be part of Trump's whole plan here. But it does kind of beg the question, if allies start openly threatening or challenging each other over territory, Cedric, what does that say about how stable Western alliances really are in a more competitive global environment today? It feels like the tides are shifting a little bit. What's this new era you think we're ushering into?
Oh, much greater uncertainty. And this comes back to currency and money. As the currency and the money is more and more broken, we're going to see more and more turbulence in all aspects of life and society, politically, and around these key areas, around energy and resources and power projection. So,
the power projection specifically is changing the game, I think, right now, as the AI data centers everywhere, obviously Bitcoin mining. Is that what we're looking to going forward? Is everybody just kind of doing a grab for how we can generate power? Because that kind of seems to be the most important thing right now.
I think so. I think that we even see people in society like Elon Musk talking about how we're moving to a currency of energy.
Right.
Because the money is broken and it's worthless. So we are moving to an energy-backed society, and we've sort of left where the savior of society. Look at the stock market. I mean, the companies backing the stock market and the value of the market is AI, and that's all energy and data driven.
Right.
And I can't imagine that any world leader would feel safe right now unless they reach agreement with the United States. Because the United States can
it's weird. No, go ahead.
No, sorry, you go.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, if I was watching a movie, right, and it was like, we live in a world where one giant power does whatever they want, and they go in and extract world leaders, I worry that when history reflects back on moments like this will be like the beginning of the origin story of the United States becoming the bad guy of the world. And you've heard in the past we're the police force for the whole world or whatever. But this is one of those times where I'm really seeing it, I think, from a different lens. Because if I was just another country, or if I went to an alien planet and they were like, oh, there's this one nation that just does whatever they want, I would think they're the bad guy. Do you think there's any merit to that? Like right now, are we starting to cross this kind of threshold from, like being the police of the world to maybe being the bad guys? What are your thoughts?
I think, unfortunately, we've been the bad guys for a long time to most of the world. And I think the world is probably sick of us for good reason. From our military to our CIA to our dollar. And Venezuela is just the epitome of all of that. Are we liberating Venezuela? If we truly are doing this to liberate Venezuela, are we going to be successful? Did we not try to liberate Libya? And has there been a success story there at all? I mean, there are free and open slave markets there today. And then that was probably the most prosperous nation in Africa. And they were trying to sell oil for a dinar-based African currency and move away from the dollar, just like Gaddafi was trying to move away from the dollar. So I think we've been the bad guys for a long time. Were we not involved in Venezuela since the 1920s? Was it not the CIA administrations and regimes that hyperinflated the economy, that brought on the power structures or the desire for Chavez and Maduro? How do we prove we're not linked to these regimes currently or in the past? So, it's sort of like if you see two gangs fight in the street, and one gang leader kills another gang member's wife, you might have empathy or sympathy for someone who just lost their family member, but I still don't want to choose sides between the gang war. So I'm not sure we're going to bring any liberation or justice. And I'm not sure that we aren't the ones who are giving Maduro safety and exit here for some sort of deal.
That's true. That's
very true. He seems to be smiling a lot in pictures and wish everyone a happy new year. He brought his wife.
A little too happy. He's a little too happy for a guy who just got pulled out by helicopter.
For sure. So it's really hard to distinguish figure out what's the difference between fact and fiction here. But when you do speak to what I hear, or people who speak to most Venezuelans from Venezuela or living in Venezuela or close to the situation, they're excited for change. That seems to be undeniable. So I'm trying to find the silver lining in that. I think another silver lining is Bitcoin is another thing that is going to get confused in this. So apparently Venezuela has been selling gold for Bitcoin and then either getting that into Tether or keeping it in Bitcoin. And maybe that's been a good thing on paper, but I don't know who has control of that. Maybe it's the Maduro family. Maybe some rumors the CIA has helped them have established custody and infrastructure from the beginning. Who knows if we have access or control over this Bitcoin? Should that be returned to the people of Venezuela? That shouldn't necessarily. If we do confiscate it, shouldn't we return that? Wouldn't that be part of justice? But it seems like our policy would be to keep it. That doesn't seem good for the people of Venezuela. But what I do think that this shows is if the United States government can seize their president, can seize their oil, or at least their access to oil, and control the distribution of it and the profiteering around it or the investment in it. Well, the only thing governments and states can't take are Bitcoin and self-custody from individuals. That can't be done around for states because if they have multi-sig and we figure out who has the keys. But for individuals, Bitcoin and self-custody is the only thing that can't be taken from you by the state. So this is really shining a light on Bitcoin. We see Bitcoin catching a little bit of wind in its sails here. It seems like it could be Bitcoin's moment to shine. It seems like 2026 could be all about Bitcoin. We'll see.
We'll see. If they take Venezuela's Bitcoin, though, I think it's official. We are the bad guy, and this has been a very sobering start to my 2026. I'll have to work on my laugh because apparently we're the villains now. All right, we're going to move on to our next story here, Cedric, because as geopolitical tensions continue to disrupt travel, trade routes, and access across key regions, those same pressures are now showing up clearly in global commodity markets. Copper just broke through a fresh all-time high, pushing above $13,000 per metric ton as global supply tightens and inventories increasingly flow into the United States. 3-month copper futures in London climbed more than 3%, extending a rally of over 20% since late November and marking one of the strongest moves across major commodity markets. At the center of the surge is Washington. Expectations that Trump's administration could impose tariffs on refined copper have triggered a rush to ship metal into the United States before any trade barriers are put in place. The result is that copper, which once moved freely across global markets, is now effectively being locked inside American warehouses. U.S. imports recently reached their highest level since July, while inventories in COMEX warehouses have ballooned to more than 500,000 short tons. Now, at the same time, copper stocks tracked by the London Metal Exchange have nearly been cut in half over the past year, leaving buyers outside the U.S. facing tighter supply. Analysts say that inventories that once acted as a global buffer are no longer playing that role, amplifying price pressure across the rest of the market. There is also a structural demand story underneath the rally here. Copper remains a critical input for power grids, renewable energy systems, electric vehicles, data centers, and infrastructure needed to support AI and electrification. Supply growth has struggled to keep pace to mine disruptions, constrained smelting capacity, and historically low processing fees. Some analysts warn that prices may be running ahead of near-term physical demand. Others argue the move reflects a broader shift, with countries and companies racing to secure strategic materials in a more fragmented global trade environment. Now, why this should matter to viewers at home is that copper prices tend to ripple outward. They influence construction costs, energy projects, and manufacturing margins, while also offering a real-time signal of how trade policy and reindustrialization are reshaping the global economy. Bringing Cedric back. Cedric, copper prices just hit an all-time high, and much of that move is tied to fears the U.S. could impose tariffs. For viewers who don't follow commodities closely, why does the threat of tariffs alone cause prices to jump so sharply?
Well, tariffs feel like a fee to the consumer. It, generally speaking, gets passed directly to the end consumer. Companies are not going to just eat tariffs. So and Trump has been very abrupt and very clear that he's going to at will issue tariffs whenever he deems necessary, with a threat of tariffs, and those could be negotiation ploys. But long term, I think we're seeing sort of commodity prices rise, and I think the U.S. is trying to fight back on. Did I lose my camera there?
We can hear you. You can keep going.
Okay, but trying to fight back on commodity, on inflation. So, are we entering an era of deflation? Will the dollar sort of strengthen through these currency wars in the short term? I think long term, the dollar will definitely, become worth less over time. But will there be a little strength in the dollar? Will we see sort of prices stabilize or rise because commodity prices are going up and input prices are going up and sort of the cost of running supply chains? Will we see supply chain disruptions? So I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the markets. All the metals are being looked at. Platinum is racing, right? Rhodium's probably racing. Gold is at all-time highs. Silver was at all-time highs. So is silver going to rip from 80 to, now 75 to 100? Is it going to kind of calm down and go back down to 50 or 60? Everyone's looking at what's happening with Venezuela and all these issues to see how the markets react in the short term and what happens to sort of consumers and how hard do they get hit.
Yeah.
I think, even anecdotally, I've seen the RV markets are getting crushed. I think you're seeing the car markets calm down, both new and used. Boats have been crushed. So all these sort of recreational vehicles are coming down in price and value. So there's a lot of sort of uncertainty.
Yeah,
Sure.
It's not that surprising, though. Like you said, of course, the tariffs are going to pass the cost along to consumers. But as we've seen, as you mentioned, silver and gold have had great years. These are all things that are apparently very integral to AI computing, right? And we're seeing the United States starting to treat resources like these precious metals, like energy or defense assets, because you want to get as much as you can to be prepared for the AI race that we're currently in. So interesting times. It might be time for me to get some more metals too, but we'll see. That's for another day. All right, we're going to take a quick break here, Cedric. But when we're back, we got our Bitcoin story of the hour. So stay tuned. More Roxom TV news coming your way after this quick break. $92K mark this morning. And as markets react to government stockpiling strategic resources, new questions are emerging about whether the United States government may have quietly done the opposite with Bitcoin. As an investigation by Bitcoin Magazine journalist Frank Corva is drawing widespread attention after raising the possibility that the U.S. Department of Justice sold Bitcoin in direct conflict with a standing presidential order. Now, at the center of the issue is Executive Order 14233, signed by President Donald Trump, which mandates that Bitcoin acquired through criminal or civil forfeiture shall not be sold and must instead be preserved as part of the United States Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. Now, before we go further, here is President Trump himself confirming that policy, speaking at the White House Crypto Summit last March. Let's take a look.
Fortunately, in recent years, the U.S. government has foolishly sold tens of thousands of additional Bitcoin that were worth billions and billions of dollars had they not sold them, but they did sell them, mostly during the Biden administration. Not a good thing to have done. From this day on, America will follow the rule that every Bitcoin knows very well: never sell your Bitcoin. That's a little phrase that they have. I don't know if that's right or not. Who the hell knows, right? Who knows? Who knows? But so far, it's been right. And well, let's keep it that way.
Now, according to Corva's reporting, the U.S. Marshals Service, acting under DOJ authority, appears to have liquidated roughly 57.55 Bitcoin valued at about $6.3 million, forfeited by Samurai Wallet developers Keon Rodriguez and William Longerhand Hill as part of their November 2025 plea agreement. Now, documents obtained in the investigation titled Asset Liquidation Agreement show the Bitcoin was transferred on November 3rd of 2025. On-chain data indicates the funds were sent to a Coinbase Prime address associated with institutional liquidation services rather than remaining in government custody. Now, that address now shows a zero balance, strongly suggesting the Bitcoin has already been sold. Legal experts cited in the report note neither the DOJ policy nor federal forfeiture statutes require Bitcoin to be liquidated, and that existing law allows such assets to be held in kind. The case also has renewed scrutiny of the Southern District of New York, a jurisdiction long criticized for aggressive crypto prosecutions even after DOJ guidance urged restraint. Public backlash has been swift, with Bitcoin advocates arguing the reported liquidation undermines claims that the United States is building a long-term strategic Bitcoin position. Now, that concern has now reached Capitol Hill, where Senator Cynthia Lummis publicly questioned why Bitcoin would be sold when the president explicitly directed it to be preserved. Now, why this matters is that it goes beyond a single transaction. If federal agencies are ignoring clear executive orders on digital assets, it raises serious questions about accountability and whether U.S. Bitcoin policy is being enforced in practice or only in rhetoric. Until the DOJ explains who authorized the sale and why, this case remains a key test of whether federal Bitcoin policy is being followed or quietly undermined from within. We're bringing Cedric back. Cedric, at the heart of this story, it's a pretty simple question here. Did a federal agency follow a direct presidential order or not? How serious is it if the DOJ ignored an executive order involving Bitcoin? What's your beat on this?
They did not follow the order. They sold, or the Bitcoin is no longer in government control unless the government custodies their Bitcoin at Coinbase, which I would think would be unfortunate. and ill-advised. So I think this whole case has been, in my opinion, mishandled, has been a gross dereliction of duty and an overreach of injustice. So I think Keone Rodriguez and Bill are innocent men who have been politically persecuted by SDNY. And I think, from hiding or withholding exculpatory evidence, from not understanding or adhering to guidance from FinCEN that clearly stated that they're not breaking any laws regarding the license that FinCEN would issue, to violating Trump's executive order and the guidance given from the DOJ in Washington. So I think all Americans who believe in freedom, who believe in privacy and freedom of speech, should be alarmed. This should be a much bigger case. This should be mainstream news. This should be as big or bigger than Ross Ulbricht. Fortunately, Ross has thankfully come out, already spoken, and said that he also thinks President Trump should issue a pardon. In my heart of hearts, I hope the Trump administration it's Venezuela and everything going on and all the prep and everything that went into that they're sort of not dealing with this right now. But every day, Keone and Bill are behind bars is an injustice. They did not commit a crime. Software writers should not be you shouldn't go to prison for writing code.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, this story is specifically interesting because the reporting from Corva suggests that this Bitcoin may have been sold quietly based on on-chain data. So my question to you, Cedric, is why is transparency especially important with Bitcoin compared to traditional government-held assets?
Well, because it has a scarce and finite supply, and you can't print more Bitcoin. Same way it's very hard. It's impossible to print metals. You can dig or put more effort into speeding up sort of the emission rate of gold or the other precious metals, but no one can print Bitcoin. So if you don't have the Bitcoin, you just have, if you don't have custody and someone else does, you don't know if they have the Bitcoin. You don't know if they will have the Bitcoin. It's just an IOU. If mistakes are made or if corruption is had, there's no way to replace it. And it's a public and transparent ledger. There are ways to obscure or take control of your Bitcoin and make it more private. But those take advanced techniques and require more knowledge and sophistication. But it's a very public and private ledger, and there are pros and cons to that.
And stepping back, Cedric, what does this situation reveal to you about the gap between political messaging around Bitcoin and how government institutions are actually behaving once the headlines fade right now? What is this telling you?
Sure. I think that the messaging has been Bitcoin inclusive and positive Bitcoin, but I think the actions have really been about stable coins and about crypto and much more centralized systems and control. I think the amount that has happened on the ground during the Trump administration has been 5 or 10x whatever a Harris or Biden administration would have accomplished in 12 months along the lines of financial surveillance and rolling out stable coins and regulation. So, and very little, I think, around Bitcoin. I do want to give credit. They pardoned Ross Ulbricht, and I think that was a single issue type, or sort of very prominent issue, paramount, and fantastic that Ross got freed because that was an injustice. So, but much more to be done. I'd like to see Bitcoin treated like money, like the dollar, and not taxed on any transaction. No realized gains or losses.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a long way to go, but thankfully we have great, champions of the space like yourself and your amazing podcast, the Bitcoin Matrix podcast, where people can go and educate themselves and learn why this is such an important asset for the future of humanity. So for those of our audience at home that are said, man, I need more Cedric, what's the best place I can send him to learn more about you, Cedric, see what you're tweeting, and where can they go check out the Bitcoin Matrix podcast so they can get a taste of it for themselves?
Sure. Well, Bitcoin Matrix is on YouTube, on Rumble, anywhere you download or listen to podcasts, Bitcoin Matrix. My name is Cedric Youngelman. You could also find me as the co-host on Bitcoin Center, which we'll do live this afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern, which is sort of a debate style show. Come for the laughs, come for the jokes, and some talk about Bitcoin macro and finance. We get into it with my co-host, Paul Tarantino. Anywhere you want to hear, sort of, if you want to listen to philosophical conversations about the impacts of Bitcoin on society and culture and economics, please tune into the Bitcoin Matrix. And thank you so much, Hank, for coming on your show.
Oh, thank you so much. It's always great getting to delve into conversations with you here on the RoxomTV News. So thank you for your time, Cedric, and we're excited I think it's going to be a really good year. 2026 year is going to be really good for Bitcoin, and I'm excited to navigate that journey with you and many others in the space. So thank you so much for your time this morning. Happy New Year, and enjoy the rest of your week, buddy. I'll see you next week.
Happy New Year, Hank. Thank you so much. See you next week.
Happy New Year. Thanks, Cedric. Cheers. All right, we're going to take a quick break here at RoxomTV News, but when we're back, we're going to be starting the second hour of today's show with our second special guest of the day who's going to be dropping by in just a bit. So stay tuned. More RoxomTV News coming your way right after this break. As we begin our second hour of today's show, here's a quick reset on the top stories from our first hour this morning. So markets remain in focus after copper surged to record highs, driven by U.S. stockpiling that's tightening global supply and draining inventories elsewhere. Now, the move is being fueled by trade policy concerns and long-term demand tied to electrification, infrastructure, and AI, underscoring how economic strategy and geopolitics are becoming increasingly intertwined. Now, that same tension between resources, security, and sovereignty is playing out in Europe, where leaders are closing ranks around Greenland. You see, President Trump's renewed talk of U.S. control has prompted a firm response from Denmark and its allies, testing NATO unity and highlighting the growing strategic importance of the Arctic as competition intensifies. And that broader theme of power, leverage, and intervention brings us back to Venezuela. You see, the U.S. raid that led to Nicolás Maduro's capture is now under international scrutiny, with the United Nations saying the operation undermined international law. Inside Venezuela, power has shifted to interim President Delcy Rodríguez, a longtime regime insider, as the country settles into a tense calm marked by uncertainty and increased security. U.S. intelligence assessments suggest this outcome was anticipated, prioritizing continuity over an immediate transfer of power to the opposition. For Venezuelans on the ground, daily life remains defined less by diplomacy and more by fear, economic pressure, and unanswered questions about what comes next. Joining us now is the co-founder of the Bitcoin hardware store and speaker for the Bitcoin Coast in El Salvador, Ronnie Avendano. Ronnie, welcome to the show this morning. How are you? Happy New Year. Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing well. Happy New Year. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, the pleasure is all ours, Ronnie. We got a lot to talk about this morning. First, I want to start with when you first saw the news about the U.S. raid in Venezuela and the fallout that ensued. What was your immediate reaction to this? Did it feel like a turning point or more like another chapter in a long-running story? What was the beat you got from it?
Yeah, actually, the very first thing I did when I saw the news was message my Venezuelan friends who are living here in El Salvador or who have been here. Because it's a topic of, it's a conversation that we've had quite a lot. And I wanted to get their idea as to what they thought was happening, why it had happened, what
Yeah.
they see coming, what they see in the future. Personally, for me, I think it's just an ongoing story. We've been hearing this since I can remember, really, about Venezuela and Maduro. He's been in power for so long now that I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. I think this is going to continue to prolong itself. As we can see now, Maduro and the PR that he's putting out there, I gotta say, is pretty impressive. He's making himself out to seem like he's the victim here, which
Yeah.
I'm sure there's always two sides to a story, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. So that's really all
Right.
I got to base my assumptions off right now.
Yeah, it's hard to really know how to feel as an outsider right now because I've seen, there's plenty of videos online and you have people in the streets in many cities here in the United States, protesting what's going on. But then I'll see videos from Venezuela and the people seem thrilled about it. So when you're talking to your Venezuelan friends, what side of that camp do they seem to be on right now? Are they happy about it because it's just something different? Or are they upset at, what many are calling kind of a gross misuse of power by the United States? What seems to be their sentiment right now?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we've seen repeat in history over time, not just with Venezuela, but, with Iraq and
Right.
Iran and all these different places, right? But my Venezuelan friends, the reason they left and the reason I met them here in El Salvador is because they obviously were not happy with the leadership that was being displayed out in their country. Yeah, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, but I think that's also what drove them into Bitcoin was stepping away from the powers that be in their region and getting involved into something else. So obviously there's a
Right.
little bit of the economy may be more unstable now than it was just a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago, but they seem to be happy that there's a change happening. Now, maybe the way that the change was made might not have been what they had imagined, but they've been asking for this for
Right.
quite some time. So it's really good to see
Okay.
that the people of Venezuela, which is where this is happening, the majority of them seem to be happy or seem to be excited about a change of course, a change of direction. And I think that's what we need to really look at is the people who are being affected by this, how do they feel? And so far, the
Right.
sentiment that I'm getting is a positive one.
Okay, well, that's I'm encouraged to hear that because as I was talking in our previous hour with our last guest, if I was dropped off on a new planet, right, and I went to a country and they said there's this big country that kind of does whatever it wants and it invaded another country and took its president, I would just automatically assume those are the bad guys. But to hear that inside Venezuela, people are actually feeling, feel like they're being liberated from Maduro certainly puts me a little bit at ease for now because I don't know. I'd be curious to see how history reflects back on this in 100 years. But I'm glad to hear boots on the ground are happy about it. And you mentioned Bitcoin, so that's actually a great segue for us to get into our Bitcoin story of the hour that relates very much to Venezuela. So guys, let's roll the stinger and get into it. Welcome back. So as Bitcoin continues to intersect with global finance, it also increasingly is appearing in geopolitical narratives. A recent article published by Zero Hedge is fueling speculation that individuals connected to Venezuela's Maduro government may control as much as $60 billion worth of Bitcoin. Now, if accurate, that figure would place Venezuela among the largest Bitcoin holders in the entire world. At this stage, the claim remains unconfirmed and speculative. Now, the report alleges that Venezuelan gold exports and sanctioned oil revenues were converted into Bitcoin between 2018 and 2021. According to the article, intermediaries in Turkey and the UAE facilitated gold to crypto transactions, with funds later moved through mixers and stored in cold wallets. Now, what's important here is what has not been independently verified. There is no publicly identified wallet or wallet cluster showing state-level Bitcoin holdings anywhere near that scale. Now, there has also been no confirmation from court filings, intelligence agencies, or major blockchain forensic firms. What is verifiable, though, is more limited limited, but still meaningful. Venezuela has experienced years of hyperinflation, driving citizens toward Bitcoin mining and peer-to-peer markets as a way to preserve purchasing power. At the government level, crypto rails have been explored as a method of working around U.S. sanctions, particularly through stablecoins. The PDVSA crypto corruption scandal confirmed that oil transactions were settled using USDT with payments routed through private wallets. On CNBC, reporter Mackenzie Segalos recently confirmed that stablecoins have been used in Venezuelan energy transactions, with some proceeds later moving into Bitcoin. Now, opposition figures have also discussed Bitcoin openly. In fact, in a 2024 interview, opposition leader Maria Corina Machado described Bitcoin as a potential reserve asset and a financial tool for national resilience. Now, that context, it matters, because there is a significant gap between documented crypto usage and the existence of a $60 billion Bitcoin reserve under state control. Now, why this should matter to viewers at home is that stories like this show both Bitcoin's global reach and the need for verification. Bitcoin can move value across borders when traditional systems break down, but extraordinary claims still require transparent on-chain evidence before they reshape how the world understands power and money. We're bringing Ronnie back. Ronnie, when you see a headline claiming Venezuela might secretly control tens of billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, what's your first reaction here? Is it curiosity, skepticism, a bit of both? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, my initial reaction, honestly speaking, is Bitcoin is for everyone. And this is what this is one of its use cases, whether we like it or not. Bitcoin is freedom money. It's decentralized, and so there is nobody that is controlling it. And taking a couple steps back, I'm Salvadoran Canadian. I left Canada because I didn't feel like my government aligned with my views. Bitcoin is there for them to use it's a problem solver. It's a way to transfer that value. Now, one thing that you mentioned, which was extremely important, is that Bitcoin is not private. Bitcoin is not anonymous. Bitcoin is a public ledger. So as you mentioned, these are things that we can look for. We can take some blockchain analytics and start diving into, is this real? Is this not real? How transparent have they been? But this is the technology that we're in. Bitcoin's only about 16 years old. So I think we're all still learning. There's still so much that we can learn from Bitcoin. But this is a use case. A use case is someone doesn't agree with you, someone who, the people that control the money printers don't agree with you. Well, there's this other thing that nobody controls the money printer. It's decentralized and you can use it, whether it could be Venezuela, it could be the US with their Bitcoin strategic reserve, it could be El Salvador, it could be a sovereign individual or a sovereign country. It doesn't matter. This is what Bitcoin does. That was my initial reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is an interesting case because there's a big gap here between what's actually confirmed, like stablecoins being used in oil transactions, and what is still speculative, like a massive state-level Bitcoin reserve. So, Ronnie, how do you think viewers should go about separating real signal here from headline noise in stories like this? What would be your recommendation?
Ooh, that's a good question. My recommendation for people is always to continue to stack your sats. Don't worry about anyone else's stack, but continue to focus on yourself. If this story is true, I want you to imagine a world where instead of stacking Bitcoin, the Venezuelan government was stacking gold or silver. How would that work? How would that stuff would get immediately, taken, because you can't stack $60 billion worth of gold. I could stack $60 billion worth of Bitcoin on a piece of paper this size. Imagine trying to find, it's like finding a needle in a haystack, but try hiding $60 billion worth of gold. That's a little bit more difficult. So that's going to be the initial thing that I tell people, look at that use case and apply it to yourself. What is it that we as individuals who are trying to be, free? Freedom is one of the biggest things in the world, US, Canada, wherever we go, and implement that yourself. If a government is doing it, doesn't matter what government is doing it, then the people also have the power to do the exact same thing. And we've seen over history, history tends to repeat itself. So whether it's Venezuela,
Yeah.
whether it's, El Salvador, whether it's Saudi Arabia, it doesn't matter. These stories will continue to repeat itself on a global level, but also at an individual level. So us as individuals, we must take what is happening here and take it as a use case, take it as a case study. What can we learn from these things? And I think for me, the biggest thing that I can learn from here is if $60 billion is able to be hidden and never found again, if these keys, let's say it's dispersed, like you mentioned, there's no one single wallet with that large cluster. All these UTXOs are broken apart. But if there's 20 different, let's say 20 different wallets, and not a single one of them is found, or even let's just say 10 of them are found, then there's something to be said about the power of Bitcoin, about the power of self-custody Bitcoin, and about the power that that holds of allowing nobody. It could be the most powerful government in the world trying to look for your funds and trying to bankrupt you essentially, and they are unable to do it. And I think that's I think that's the message that we as individuals must take. I think that's a very powerful message and a very powerful use case as to how Bitcoin can benefit us as individuals.
Yeah, I mean the power of Bitcoin is very real, especially when you think about it this way. Like, for as long as, I mean, the history of man for the most part, it's like we have governments issuing currency to the people, but this is people having, an asset, or we could call it a digital currency, that now is being, used by the government. So it's actually going the opposite way, and it introduces a level of accountability that we've never seen before at a government level, which is really exciting. And now turning back to Venezuela, we've known for a while now that there's a lot of ordinary Venezuelans out there that had turned to Bitcoin years ago because of hyperinflation and capital controls, things we're seeing a lot of in South America. So from your experience, Ronnie, in Bitcoin communities, how common is it for people to adopt Bitcoin first at the grassroots level before governments ever seriously end up considering it? Because that kind of seems to be the path for Bitcoin in most cases, right? And that's kind of part of its power, maybe?
Yeah, totally. I mean, you look at over the years, one of my favorite examples actually is like Nigeria. Nigeria has been accepting electronic payments for, I feel like, a decade now at this point. And the government tried to implement a CBDC, implement limits as to how much cash can be taken out of an ATM because of the fear of Bitcoin. People were using Bitcoin. You look at Latin America, it's another place. You got Venezuela, you got Argentina. All of my friends, and these are all anecdotal stories, but all of my friends that are living here in El Salvador, they've been using Bitcoin for years because they've seen their currency just absolutely crash and become worthless. And so this is a way to protect themselves. So they adopt Bitcoin as a way to fight against their monetary policy of their current government, the inflation that's being forced upon them, and they find Bitcoin. So yes, 100%, it works best when the community itself starts to really see the light and see that this is an opportunity, this is an escape hatch that actually exists. And if you're tired of the old system, then this is something new. Now, everything new is going to be scary. The first people, the early adopters, are the ones who are taking in all of the risk, but they're the ones who also gain all of the reward. So, people who purchase Bitcoin in Venezuela, Argentina, and, all these places with sky high inflation numbers, they've been able to kind of escape that that theft of value from themselves. And so I think it's very, very powerful. Here in El Salvador, it started on Bitcoin Beach. It started with a community of about 1,000 people lived here at the time. And now it's grown to a full country. And it was ground up. It was boots on the ground. It was bottom up transformation. And now we're looking at a country where people come visit us specifically because they want to see what it's like to live on a Bitcoin standard. And so I believe it is the way to work because the people themselves, we're the ones who are feeling the pain. El Salvador is a bit of a special case. I say this quite often to people because we do have the US dollar. That's our national currency. Well, it's not national, but it is our currency here in El Salvador. It is legal tender. So maybe Salvadorans and people who are in this I want to call it all of the all of the baskets, all of the currency baskets are currently burning. You know, as inflation gets higher and higher, the value is just burning down to the ground. Well, the American
Oh yeah.
one, the US dollar, is the one that's burning the slowest. And so people who are burning the
Mm-hmm.
slowest are looking at the fire across the street and are saying that, oh, that one's burning, but I'm fine here. I'm fine here. So the people in the baskets like Venezuela and Argentina, they have adopted Bitcoin, like I said, now for decades. And you mentioned it as well. They adopted Bitcoin a long time ago because they saw the need for it. Here in El Salvador, it's a little bit
Right.
more difficult, and anywhere that has maybe the US dollar, I think is going to be a bit more difficult to use it because they don't see the
Mm-hmm.
need, the necessary and immediate need to use it. But in these countries, again,
Right.
if we go to Africa, Bitcoin adoption in places like Africa and places in developing countries is astonishing. And you
Yeah.
mentioned USDT as well. So these cryptocurrencies, people are using them because they understand that this is going to be the best way for them to preserve their value. And that only comes from the
Mm-hmm.
people. The government could tell them something, but we know that you shouldn't, you might not necessarily trust the government. And so bottom up adoption is the way to go. And, we have to capture it. We have to do the best that we can to educate people because, as we know, Bitcoin works in cycles. There's your ups and there's your downs, but we got to make sure when the downs come that the people feel comfortable in what they're holding, that the people truly understand what it is that they're holding, why they got into Bitcoin. They didn't get into Bitcoin to get rich quick. They bought into Bitcoin
Mm-hmm.
to not be poor, quick. And I think that's the main
Right.
message that we have to continue pushing to motivate these communities to not stop. We've had a 25% correction here, and had we not educated the people as to that this is possible, adoption would slow
Mm-hmm.
down. And so it's very, very
Right.
important that even though adoption starts from the ground up, education is extremely important because when the bad times come, then we are prepared for that. And in places
Right.
like El Salvador, in places like Venezuela, I don't see this stopping. I actually see a bit of momentum pushing everything through. If this Bitcoin story is true, there's going to be parts, there's going to be people who are going to say, Bitcoin continues to be for criminals. This is the perfect example. But then there's going to be those
Mm-hmm.
ones who are going to get picked, and they're going to see it for what it really is. And they're going to see, no, wait, Bitcoin is for everyone. Why am I not using Bitcoin?
Right.
Why do I not understand Bitcoin? And that's the bottoms up
Mm-hmm.
approach that I think is very valuable. And so it's important that communities have community leaders to be there to assist their community when the time comes.
Yeah, you almost need kind of your own Bitcoin shaman, right? Because I kind of think of it like as currencies as like candles, right? And everybody's candle is burning. And if you have a candle from a South American country, you're like, man, this thing is burning way faster than maybe a Bitcoin candle or a dollar candle. But if you have a dollar candle, that one is pretty consistent over time. It's the slowest burning candle, but it doesn't have the jumps like Bitcoin. So to your point, people are not going to always be quite as eager to get on board the orange bandwagon if they're using the dollar consistently. But over time, you see that candle burns a lot bigger and a lot brighter compared to the dollar over time. Now, we're in an interesting inflection point right now in Bitcoin's journey, right? We're kind of moving from this grassroots movement. Now it's becoming institutionalized. Now we have more and more governments kind of turning an eye to Bitcoin. But it does beg the question here. If a government were trying to move or store value quietly using Bitcoin, as the Venezuela story kind of alludes to, what kinds of on-chain evidence would analysts normally expect to see for something like this, Ronnie? And what's missing in this case that keeps this firmly in the rumor category right now? What would we need to see to actually confirm that maybe Venezuela is holding Bitcoin?
Wow, that's a fantastic question. I mean, I couldn't give you too much in depth as to what I think they might have done or how they might have done it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for me, one of the best ways to access Bitcoin in a completely private manner is to mine your own Bitcoin, get it directly from the Coinbase,
Right.
right? And then nobody really knows that you have it. Follow best practices for owning Bitcoin. I'm going to relate this to a story that just came out yesterday. Ledger just got leaked, some more data leaks. And, it's almost like it happens every year on the date. Another Ledger leak, and so follow best practices. Create your own wallets using hardware that doesn't KYC you, that isn't going to have any data leaks. These are best practices that if you wanted to maintain privacy, if it's important to you, because remember, what privacy means is I'm not hiding from people. Privacy means I'm going to show myself to who I choose to show myself to. And that's one of the benefits of Bitcoin, right? When I share an address with somebody, I'm choosing to show myself to that person. But if I'm not showing my address to you, then I'm going to want to remain private. So, and the other thing, talking about mixers and talking about what's happening in the U.S. with the Samurai case, and what's going on there with the Wasabi wallet, and the whole privacy situation. I understand why they want to put these regulations in because of things like Venezuela. It makes it harder to determine if they have Bitcoin. It makes transparency a lot more difficult. But again, everybody deserves the right to having that transparency. Now, do governments deserve that transparency? That's a tough one. I don't think so. Governments are public. So El Salvador is a perfect scenario. El Salvador has a Bitcoin strategic reserve that is public to the people of El Salvador and to the world. Now, will the US do the same? Will these countries do the same? I do think countries have the obligation to be public to their people, and that's the benefit of Bitcoin, is that it is a public ledger. Should governments be able to hide and mix their Bitcoin? I don't think so. I don't think that's the right way of going at it. But should a private person be able to remain private in their property? 100%, I agree. So I think having these services like the Wasabis and the Samurais and the mixers and the layered twos that kind of do that just by default, I think is extremely important. How they did it, I'd like to find out myself how they did it, so that I can maybe put those practices into my own strategy. But yeah,
Right.
I don't think that we should look at this as something negative. I think we should learn from it. Because again, Venezuela, if it is true, will be a perfect use case as to why Bitcoin is necessary. At one point, the
Yeah.
Venezuelan people loved their government. And then over the years, turns out that 90% of them are not happy with the way things have turned out. But if you agree with your government at one point and don't agree with your government at another point, again, that's where these sanctions come in from. And so it's very
Right.
important that we take this Venezuela situation as a use case for what we as individuals have the power to do. Because again, I'll start with, I'll say what I started with. Bitcoin is for everyone. Whatever Venezuela can do, whatever the US can do from a technical perspective, you and I can do as well. You run your own Bitcoin
Right.
node, you have your own miner, you have your self-custody wallet, then you are able to do everything that these multi-trillion-dollar governments can do. And that is the power of Bitcoin. Is it right? Is it wrong? That's not for me to say. But if they can do it, then
Right.
we can do it too.
Absolutely. I mean, these are certainly unprecedented times, and I'll be curious to see how Bitcoin emerges on the other side of this, if there even is a Venezuelan Bitcoin strategic reserve. A lot to be answered, and we'll obviously stay up to date as we get more information. But right now, we're going to take a quick break. But when we're back, Ronnie and I are going to be chatting about the Bitcoin Coast and the Bitcoin hardware store. So stay tuned. More Roxom TV news coming your way right after this quick break. Yeah. Are you interested in effortlessly growing your Bitcoin portfolio? I sure am. And the Bitcoin credit card by Gemini earns you Bitcoin back on every purchase. You can use it like any credit card, buy lunch, gas, or your weekly groceries, and you'll earn up to 4% back instantly in Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos straight to your account. All that with no annual fee, and right now, you can grab a $200 Bitcoin welcome bonus. It's the easiest way to start building your Bitcoin stack. Just go to Gemini.com to learn more. All right, we're back with Ronnie. And Ronnie, I want to talk about what you're up to next, okay? So you're a speaker for Bitcoin Coast in El Salvador. First of all, just tell us, what is Bitcoin Coast? What problem does it solve for Bitcoiners? We want to learn more.
Yeah, so Bitcoin usage here started back in 2019, thanks to the Bitcoin Beach project, and they were focused on this little town called El Zonte, also known as Bitcoin Beach now. It's a town of about 1,000 people, and 2 years later, with the success of the project, the president of El Salvador decided to make Bitcoin a legal tender. He liked the project and he wanted to support and he wanted to use Bitcoin and have people in the country be aware of it, what it is, how it works. Implemented the Chivo wallet, and that's why. So actually, from that is where the Bitcoin hardware store started, where I co-founded that, and to educate people about Bitcoin. So the years go by and we start seeing, tourism starts to grow. People are coming down to El Salvador because they want to experience what it's like living on a Bitcoin standard. Now, for your viewers, I live in El Zonte. I live in Bitcoin Beach. I live on a Bitcoin standard. I don't have any dollars with me. I don't hold that slow burning candle. I hold the candle that's going to hold its flame for a very long time. And I just deal with the swings, ups and downs. It is what it is. But when you leave this town, it is more difficult to find these places where you can live off of Bitcoin standard. So with Jamie, I'm a volunteer there. I help them out, but the idea was let us grow this Bitcoin circular economy just from outside of El Zonte, and let's go to the neighboring beaches. So we have about from here, from El Zonte to about the roundabout of Surf City or the entrance into Surf City, it's about 15 kilometers. And within that 15 kilometers, there are another, let's say, 200,000 people maybe that live here in this area. So we wanted to expand from the 1,000 to 2,000 people that live in El Zonte, and I want to say there's about 30 different businesses here in El Zonte that accept Bitcoin. We're talking hotels, restaurants, surf shops, gift shops, the Bitcoin hardware store, motorcycle rentals, anything that you can think of in El Zonte, you will find a place that will accept Bitcoin. But the moment you leave El Zonte, there was an opportunity because we weren't seeing that growth. And why was that? You mentioned it yourself. There needs to be some type of a Bitcoin shaman or a Bitcoin leader within the community that is able to help answer these people's questions. Bitcoin is a new technology. It's just like when we started using the internet. Before the Googles of the world, you used to ask your friend to help you out using the computer. So we said the same thing. Let's expand the idea of Bitcoin Beach, which is just this little beach kilometer, it's a 1 kilometer beach with 2,000 people. Let's expand this idea and let's reach all of the businesses along this 15-kilometer, 20-kilometer coast so that when tourists come and visit, they feel like, oh, yeah, you're right. This is Bitcoin country. This is different. I can go on and spend Bitcoin anywhere. And the way to do that is by supporting these commerces, supporting the entrepreneurs, teaching them about Bitcoin, educating them about how to use it, what it is, how to accept it, dealing with their most common problems, answering their questions, and just being there as support. Because, Bitcoin is this digital money that we don't really know if it's real or not. But guess who is real? The person in your community who lives there is real. That's the person that you can count on. And so, if anything goes wrong, people know that they can come reach out to us and we will help them as much as we can with whatever the solution is. With whatever the problem is. And so that's the idea of Bitcoin Coast. Expand the Bitcoin Beach project beyond what it is. Stick along the coast. Because there's a lot of tourism coming into El Salvador right now. We just had one of our biggest booms in tourism, and we want to continue for people to use Bitcoin. Because El Zonte is so small, there's a lot of people, foreigners, expats who are coming to live here in El Salvador, want to live on the beach, but can't live in El Zonte and still want to live on a Bitcoin standard. That's the problem we were looking to solve. The education for the local Salvadorans and giving the foreigners and expats and Bitcoiners a place to spend their Bitcoin so that they can live on a Bitcoin standard.
That's amazing, and I especially like that it's a tourist location because you get people from all over the world, and they can just get a little bit of taste of what the Bitcoin circular economy is like, and they can take that back to wherever they came from and hopefully keep spreading that gospel. Now, a question I have for you is, it sounds like you're getting a lot of vendors in the area set up so that they can accept Bitcoin as payment. But there's a lot of people out there that are saying, Bitcoin really is just meant to be another store of wealth, aka like a digital gold, right? But then there's people like the Jack Dorseys of the world that fervently believe that Bitcoin needs to be used as a method of exchange, as a payment, in order for it to kind of fulfill its destiny. Why is that so important, do you think, that Bitcoin needs to be more than just a store of value, but instead also a medium of exchange? Why is that important to the Bitcoin Coast mission?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? We've heard that many, many times before. But
Yeah.
we are on Jack Dorsey's side, Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, and I'll give you an anecdotal example as well. Me being from
Yeah.
Canada, originally we have our Canadian funny money, the Canadian dollar. Been losing that candle's burning pretty quickly right now as well. And so, as a Canadian or as a European, when you come to El Salvador, well, guess what? You have to convert that money into US dollars. So, what does that mean? That means that there's an intermediary taking a cut. So, what does that mean for the vendor? That means for the vendor, you have two options. You either don't accept the sale, so you don't make the sale, or you make the sale on like a credit card. But credit card fees here in El Salvador are range from anywhere between, it's a pretty wide range, but range anywhere between 4% to 9% for a vendor. So you don't have those costs. You're not as a vendor, if you're incurring those costs, that's a 10% loss of profit for you. Now you start using
Yeah.
Bitcoin as your medium of exchange. Well, guess what? That cost now comes down. Well, what we've done as the Bitcoin Coast for these vendors actually is for a very short period of time when they got on board, we said, with using Blink, we will onboard you and off ramp you if you need dollars for free up to $1,000. Your first $1,000 every month, you can off ramp that into US dollars absolutely for free of charge. So now we're competing against these credit card companies. And ultimately, Bitcoin is a race to zero. It's about using Bitcoin so that we can get fees down lower so the competition can actually come down to our section. We use Lightning here a lot. I don't know if your viewers are familiar with Lightning or have ever done a Lightning transaction, but it's extremely important that we continue to use the Lightning network. It is an absolutely
Right.
amazing network that allows you to send peer-to-peer payments off chain using Bitcoin as your foundation, but they are instant and they are basically free. So just yesterday, for example, I did about 10 transactions and I paid 1 cent in transaction fees over
Wow.
my 10 transactions, right? It was about 1 sat for a transaction. And so this is what Bitcoin is meant for. It's a global money. So it's a global exchange. So I can now send money from El Salvador, I can send it to Venezuela instantly without any intermediary if we're using Bitcoin in a self-custodial manner. So it's extremely important that we use Bitcoin because that is how people are going to understand the value that Bitcoin brings. Yes, store of value is an extremely important part. I 100% agree with that, but
Right.
it's also ethical. And I think this is the part that's really important for me. When I go buy something, when I buy something from a vendor, when I buy something from an artisanal vendor, someone who's created things with their own hands, if I pay them in dollars, that is not ethical. Why is it not ethical? Because I know that what I just used to pay them is pretty much worthless. Okay, I'm being a little facetious. They're not worthless, but we know that that candle is burning slow and that today that I might have given them $10, but tomorrow that purchasing power has gone down. So using dollars when you have Bitcoin to me is extremely unethical because you're handing off something that you don't even want. You're handing off something that is going to continue to lose its value, and you're handing it off to somebody that may not understand that. So it's actually ethical to use Bitcoin as your medium of exchange because what you're saying is, I value what you're giving me. And so I'm going to give you something of value back in return that is not going to lose value over time, but is actually going to gain value over time and save you time, give you your time back Whereas using the US dollar or using any fiat currency is the exact opposite of that. Is I'm going to give you this because I know that it's worth more today than it will be tomorrow. And I don't feel like ethically that's right. So that's one of the ethical reasons that I think using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange is extremely important from a human connection side.
Yeah, absolutely. And as more people are, starting to stack sats on their own balance, but there's always the question of custody and what's the best way to go about it. And I want to talk really quick, Ronnie, about your company. You're the co-founder of the Bitcoin hardware store. Really quick, tell us how this came to be, what it is, who it helps, and how it, aids us in securing our stacks in the safest way possible. Tell us about it.
Yeah, there's so much information out there, right? And when I started my Bitcoin journey, I didn't really know what to look for. But one of the main things that I think is important is that everybody comes to Bitcoin from a different perspective, from a different experience. The Venezuelans did not experience Bitcoin the same way that the Americans did, right? Like for the Americans, the store of value. For the Venezuelans, it might be, the medium of exchange and not being sanctioned. So everybody comes from Bitcoin from a different perspective. So how do we teach Bitcoin to people when the spectrum is so wide? Well, that's what the Bitcoin hardware store is. We focus on best practices. We focus on Bitcoin only. We focus on self-custody because to us, those are the most important things about the Bitcoin network. That's how you take advantage of Bitcoin, is by having self-custody of it, having full security over it, because it is extremely important, and that we use it. So the Bitcoin hardware store, the idea was, let's teach people best practices. Let's work and collaborate with the companies that we agree follow the same values. And then let's teach it to the world. Let's bring this to El Salvador. Now we're focusing on international expansion. We want to be everywhere. We want to be able to teach Bitcoin best practices to everybody who's interested in learning about Bitcoin and having that community leader within your community. So it's kind of like the Apple Store. When Apple came to disrupt, Microsoft and that market share that Microsoft had at the time, what did they do? They opened up the Apple Store. So I invite you one day to come to El Salvador, come check out the Bitcoin hardware store, and I hope you get that same feeling where you're able to come in, ask the questions, talk to one of our professionals, talk to one of our consultants, use the different products that we have. We have a different variety of hardware wallets. We have nodes, we have miners. And why is it important? Because this is the way that you're really, truly able to take advantage of the Bitcoin network and the Bitcoin protocol, which is what we're seeing these governments do. So that's how it started. That's where the idea came from. And that's our goal. Our goal is to get Bitcoin into the hands of the people and have them self-custody it. Because if we can get them to self-custody it, well, then that takes power away from the banks, that takes power away from the people printing the fiat, and that gives power back to the people. Now, with power comes great responsibility, which is one of the things that we also teach as well. It's very important that you try to understand how to manage your keys, how to protect your keys, how to disperse your keys, like whatever it is you might want to do. Bitcoin is a deep rabbit hole, but we want to be there to start people off, to get them started. And for most people, myself included, when I first started into Bitcoin, I was not self-custodying it at all. I was on one of these large exchanges, and I use them to get started. But once you go down that rabbit hole and you want to self-custody your stuff, well, then here are the products. You can go to the Bitcoin hardware store and you'll see all the products lined up of what is available to you so that you can manage your Bitcoin in the best way possible.
Yeah, that's amazing. As you and I both know, education seems to be the largest barrier to entry into the space. So it's more important than ever that we have good stewards out there that are showing people how to properly get into this space, how to store, Bitcoin first on custodial exchanges and then their own wallets, because that journey does not happen overnight. As I'm sure you and I both know, every person I talk to, it always takes them months, if not years, to fully grasp the importance of Bitcoin. And we're really thankful we have people like you out there spreading the good word and orange pilling the masses, because we need that. Now, I'm sure you gained at least a couple of new fans from our audience today, Ronnie, who are interested in learning more about you, Bitcoin Coast, and the Bitcoin hardware store. So for those who are looking to learn more, what are the best places I can send them to do so?
Yeah, very easily. You can follow us on X TBHS, so the Bitcoin hardware store, TBHS_SV. If you want to learn about Bitcoin, how to live on a Bitcoin standard, Bitcoin best practices, privacy, self-custody, that is our main focus. We live on a Bitcoin standard and we want everyone else to do the same. So you can find us on X, you can find us on TikTok, you can find us on Twitter, you can email us. I highly recommend you come down to El Salvador and see it for yourself. Don't trust, verify. Come see what's happening. There's good news, there's positive news, there's negative news about what's happening here in El Salvador. And like I started off this program, right? There's two sides. You have the left and the right, but the truth is always somewhere in the middle. So come verify for yourself.
Yep.
Come check us out in El Zonte, Bitcoin Beach. If you want to take a quick vacation, if you're in the US, you're only about a couple hours away by airplane. So I highly recommend everybody come down and visit us. Come talk to myself, come talk to my co-founder, Jamie, or whoever's at the store at the time. And if you have any Bitcoin questions, please come by.
Amazing. Well, there's certainly nothing better than experiencing the real thing for yourself. And we really appreciate experiencing our time with you here this morning, Ronnie. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and expertise. And I encourage everyone to go check him out down in Bitcoin Beach, because there's a lot to learn. And we're super happy to have people like Jamie who's teaching us these lessons that we all need to learn at some point or another if we're entering the Bitcoin space. So Ronnie, thank you so much for your time today. Happy New Year, and hopefully we'll see you more during this 2026 season. I think it's going to be a big, good one for Bitcoin, so I'm excited.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. And see you guys soon. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thanks, Jamie. Ronnie, thank you. All right, we're taking a quick break here, but when we're back, we're going to wrap things up here at RoxomTV News, so stay put. More coming your way right after this quick break. Welcome back to RoxomTV News. I am joined by the most patriotic man in all of Bitcoin, Walker America. Walker, Happy New Year. How are you? Thanks for joining us.
Happy New Year, Hank. Good to see you. Good to be back here. Yeah, I'm doing great. I guess I cannot say the same about former Venezuelan dictator, Nicolás Maduro. But I'm glad to not have subjugated an entire country full of people and be in handcuffs in New York right now. So I'd say it's a good day for me.
Yeah, I'd say so. Your hair is flowing in the new year. It looks great. Maduro, yeah, he has seen better days. 2026 can't be a win for everyone right off the jump. But we're excited. I know your show is coming up next. You got, I think, a 3-hour block. What's in store for the audience out there? We want to know.
Yeah, I'm very excited. So yeah, 3-hour block every Tuesday, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This week, we've got a fantastic show cooked up. We've got Frank Corva coming on first. He was actually just at the arraignment hearing of former President Maduro in New York City. Mm-hmm. He also just broke the story that the DOJ and Southern District of New York has sold the Bitcoin that Samurai Devs paid as part of their plea deal, even though Executive Order 14233 mandates that forfeited Bitcoin be held in the U.S. Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. So some definite drama there. Mm-hmm. We're also, I'm sure, going to talk about Venezuela and the implications of it more broadly. Frank has put out some research suggesting there may be a shadow Bitcoin reserve there. Let's see. And then a little bit later in the episode, we're going to have on Mauricio Di Bartolomeo. He is the co-founder and CSO of Ledin, HODL with Ledin. And he actually has just an incredible story. He is Venezuelan. His brother and he both started a Bitcoin mining operation in Venezuela under Maduro. His brother ended up having to flee the country, like literally smuggle himself and his family across the border. The government confiscated all their Bitcoin miners. It's an incredible story. Really excited though to talk to Mauricio, because I think with all of this stuff happening in Venezuela, it's very easy to be an armchair expert, especially as a privileged American who doesn't live under the yoke of a socialist dictator. I want to hear from people who actually are Venezuelan, because again, it's very easy for the New York liberals to protest and hold their fancy signs. Meanwhile, all the people that are Venezuelans in New York seem to have different ideas about it. So should be a great show. We're going to talk about that. We got a bunch of other stuff as well. BitChat downloads spiking by 1 million users in Uganda ahead of their election. Wow. We've got just a lot of other stuff on the horizon here. We're also going to be talking about more broadly, I think, the media landscape shifting with Governor Tim Walz stepping down, or saying he's going to step down, no longer run for re-election after the Nick Shirley videos came out. I think it just says a lot about the impact of legacy media or lack thereof versus independent media in this new era. So excited. It should be a fun show. You can tell I'm stoked about it. And yeah, excited to have the guests on as well.
Yeah, I mean, you got some heavy hitters on there. Never better than hearing from someone who's actually talking with people whose boots are on the ground in Venezuela as to how they're feeling about it and dissecting this ever complicated geopolitical matrix that we've got ourselves in. It sounds like you got a pretty stacked show in order. So everyone, make sure you stay tuned here on Roxom TV to check out Walker America Next. It promises to be a good one. I know I will be watching, but we're going to wrap up on my show here, Walker. But I wish you a very happy show today. It's going to be a good one. I'll be watching. So good luck out there and Happy New Year. Always a pleasure to see you.
Thanks, Hank. Good to see you too.
Cheers. All right, gang, that is a wrap here at Roxom TV News for our Tuesday edition. But if you haven't already, make sure we will be back tomorrow. So make sure you're following, and subscribing to Roxom TV News, and me at Hank at Roxom TV on whatever your platform of choice is. And again, stay tuned because Walker America is up next with Frank Corva, Mauricio Bartolomeo of Ledin. They're going to be talking about what is actually going on in Venezuela and how the people there are feeling about it. You won't want to miss it, so stay tuned. And we will be back tomorrow here on Roxom TV News with more of the day's top stories, so you won't want to miss it. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, hodl strong, and I'll see you boys and girls tomorrow.